Hello, everyone. We're so excited you're joining us here again at the ABLE conference, and we welcome you to the presentation we've titled Making Multimedia Matter, Curating and Evaluating Artifacts for Identity Construction. And you can tell that we really love alliteration. It shows up in a lot of our titles. So you will see in our bit.lys that a lot of them start with MMM. And we hope that you're as excited as we are to talk about strategies for helping students think through compelling multimedia artifacts in their e-portfolios. So Shell, I'm going to hand you that one.
Okay. Welcome and introductions, but we are doing an introduction activity because we're hoping it will kind of kick off some of this discussion and why this is a big deal, if you will. Then we're going to briefly talk about overview of multimodal composition, what, how, why. We're going to have you think about creative and digital literacies as outcomes, if you will. And then just trying to get us to, as a conversation session to talk about assignment design and assessment and trying to juggle things like multimodal composition, identity construction, and creative and digital literacies. Lots of buzzwords there. Lots of things to potentially talk about. So my name's Shelly Rodrigo. I'm the senior director of the writing program at the University of Arizona. All those other things are weird titlings I have. Basically think English 101, 102. That's the shop that I run here. And I think that's probably enough for now.
Sure. Yeah, I like it. My name is Megan Mize. I'm the director for ePortfolios and digital initiatives at Old Dominion University. I also teach in our English department, mostly the gen eds, but a variety of other courses too. And I'm getting ready to teach an IDS, an interdisciplinary studies ePortfolio course for cybersecurity, which is always interesting when my dissertation was written on Elizabeth I. So a long and winding road to get here.
Megan, I'm so glad you said that. I didn't even think about the fact that I am teaching a portfolio class right now. Our professional and technical writing certificate has a 1-credit portfolio class that every summer I teach, and it just didn't even dawn on me. It's like, oh yeah, I'm doing that right now, and that has to do with
well, I know we have folks like I think Amy Powell I saw was in here, and I know she's thinking about that too. So just to say there's a lot of us that are thinking through that. And I think this discussion about how do we help students create and curate multimedia as something that's more than an add-on is pretty important, especially within those courses. So if you are like me, you're probably a huge fan of takeaways at a conference, and we love to give goodie bags digitally. So you can access our materials in a Google Drive folder, which will have this Google Slides presentation. We'll also have the introduction activity we're about to run. We will also include a transcript of today's chat, and really anything else that is generated out of this conversation. If you are someone who likes QR codes, you can also scan this code, and we will be dropping the link into the chat for the slides throughout, but you can see the bit.ly up at the top. So all that to say is this material does not disappear into the ether. Once we are done talking, you are certainly welcome to access it at any time. Shelly?
So we just want to take a moment and remind everyone that we'd like this to be a safe session that folks can feel comfortable talking about their experiences and what's going on with their teaching or administrative work, or even some, doing teacher and student. We also want you to feel comfortable in your identity in terms of adding pronouns to your Zoom handle, video on, video off. Everything as you need at this point in the pandemic, in the summer, and online. And the one thing I like to kind of remind folks about this is especially if some folks do talk about some very detailed scenarios, we are being recorded. So keep that in mind. We are being recorded, but also, try to keep in mind if you're sharing with others, talk about the topics and not necessarily individuals.
Okay, I will say as a quick note on our own selves, I forgot to actually switch to sharing permissions on that folder. And I'll do that in a moment while you all are doing an introductory activity. And so it doesn't say Mentos, it says intros on the bit.ly. And Shelly, if I'll drop that in the link in a moment into the chat. But we're so glad you're here. We really value the community of ABLE and ePortfolio practitioners. And to jumpstart this conversation, we would like to do an activity with you all in which we ask you to introduce yourself in this slide deck. So I'm going to share it in the chat and hope past Megan set her settings right. And if not, it's cool. It's a second to fix it. And we're asking that you click that link I've dropped in the chat, the one that looks like intros, and select a slide that does not have Shelly or me on it and make it your own. Put your name in, add an image that's either yourself or reflects who you are or your interests. And then in the text box, spend a little time talking about what that image and that font choice and color choices might reflect about you. So we're going to give you a couple minutes. This is your work time. And as you're doing that, I'm going to slyly slide over and change the folder settings. So ignore the woman behind the curtain.
And if we don't have enough slides, feel free to right click on an empty one on the left hand listing of them, right click and duplicate slide. That'll make one for you too. I find it's sometimes easier to drop in the middle or towards the end because everyone's going for those first couple slides. In some ways, you might want to think about this activity as you're making decisions about what image do I put there. Maybe put your kind of prototypical standing image you've been using for the past probably year. We've all had to have the profile images for a while now. And, think about how that reflects on you. Maybe put an image that you'd like to put and have not, why you'd rather have that. Okay.
I can't believe that I've messed up twice on Drive, the thing I use so often. Please hit refresh. You will be able to edit.
Sometimes when students do this, sometimes instead of an image of you, something representative. So I'm thinking about Allie and her horse. Or Cindy and the dragon. I'm enjoying seeing these image choices.
I'm thinking on slide 11, the undergraduates look younger every year.
Right?
Yes. You do like the bunnies.
And the Olympians look younger every cycle too.
For certain.
Like undergrads.
Yes.
And I just want to say to the folks who put their kind of regular professional headshots, I really appreciate that because you're taking the time to think about what is this? What does it say about me? Sometimes it's even just going to throw this out here for other things to consider, how it's cropped, what shape it is.
I'll admit when we started doing this activity for ourselves, I didn't think to change the font until Shelly did it on her slide. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to stick to the template. I'm free. And then you realize, oh yeah, a lot of times that kind of choice doesn't necessarily occur to our designers either as they're going through these things.
Now, I'm curious with David's image.
Okay, we know you're still composing, and we invite you to continue to do so. I figured I'd do a quick gloss on mine, and maybe Shelly could gloss on hers. Certainly. We know you all can read, but we started playing with this. And, if you look at my write-up, when I picked this image, although I am a very smiley person, and I'm actually pretty well known for my playful approach to a lot of pedagogies, in my portfolio, my professional work, I often choose a non-smiling photo. I feel a lot of times that women are asked to appear really approachable and friendly, but that kind of lessens their ethos in some regards as a serious scholar. And so for this image, I made sure I had my hipster eyeglass frames on, natural lighting, face forward. I also purposely chose an image where the color matched the background, or at least complemented the background. And I matched my font to my hair. And as I put in here, it's kind of interesting because very a while ago, someone asked me, aren't you afraid to show a picture with your hair color? And when we talk about identity and we talk about privilege and social risk and all of that, at the time, because I was a graduate student, I gave the really glib answer, well, if they don't like me because of my hair, that's not a good fit. But then later I thought about it and I thought there's some colleagues who don't have the privilege of being different, of being outside the mold. And so just the inclusion of this image is doing a lot of rhetorical work, and it is telling you certain things about me, my sense of comfort, my sense of security in being able to present in those ways. And so, if you really to deep dive, you could talk more about the fact that I've purposely chosen a background that doesn't have a lot of content, and thus I float in kind of a unknown space here, right? And I saw JW's comment about places text, so I definitely want to turn towards him in a little bit. Shelley, how about you?
Sure. This image, just so you're aware, I use this as the profile image for my University of Arizona Google account. So I have to use Outlook for my mail and my calendar, but we still have an institutional Google account. So it shows up in that icon, and also for our LMS, for us it's D2L. Part of it is we have a an Adobe Creative Cloud license. And so I taught myself and other colleagues how to do basically, sketch something out, layer images. And because I had this picture with the sweatshirt, it was fun to do this. But what I like about this and saying, and again, where my own both teaching and scholarship and institutional support has been a lot lately, is with digital and creative literacies. This says a lot about my digital and creative literacies. I have the ability to know how to do that. I had the ability to know how to go to our institution's homepage and get the exact colors, the blue and red, and how to change them in Google Drive. I knew that it's like, I didn't see a college lettering font, but I knew if I searched for it, chances are Google had it, and I added it to the slide deck. All of that ability says a lot. But then at the same time, and kind of wanting to end on this, the fact that it's still on top of the slide deck, and I picked this slide deck, I thought it was pretty, and it clashes with it. I mean, it realistically clashes with it. And it kind of still ends on you clashed, your cropping of this image isn't quite, part of me is, I wonder where my better one isn't quite off. And that it's kind of like spelling errors in cover letters, where on some level, that sometimes trying to override a slide theme or trying to crop something perfectly is actually really fine-tuned, can be difficult. Or it could also just be, on some level, accent, like not pronouns, what is it with thes? I'm blanking on it right now. Sorry. Yes, I'm the writing person. I'm blanking on it. But that on some level, on the one hand, I show all this, and then I feel like it's almost undermined by the fact it clashes. And I think that happens with our students, and someone all of a sudden starts going like, do you really know what you're doing? You didn't clean that up. And I'm comparing to Cindy's, where she went in and changed it, and that clash is not there.
Yeah, and since it is a conversation session, maybe one of you brave souls would like to talk about the choices you made and how you made decisions here, and how you represented yourself in font, template, color, image, so forth.
Well, since mine was up there, I can go if you want.
Yeah, Cindy, I do. It's great.
So I chose the red and blue colors because U of A has always been a huge part of my life. I grew up going to football and basketball games with the family, and we tailgated a lot. I graduated with my undergrad from the U of A, and now I am actually working for the U of A. And so that's why I decided to change everything to kind of the red and blue U of A color schemes. And the image that I chose is kind of my Zoom image, just because I don't like having my face on there a lot. And so it's Deathwing, which is a character from World of Warcraft, one of my favorite computer games I used to play. And so he is a knitted stuffed animal, basically. So he kind of shows two of my favorite hobbies, which is knitting and gaming. And also he is sitting on my dad's railroad town. And my dad used to like to build railroad towns for like his trains. And he was also a U of A graduate, and he's the one that got me into everything U of A, basically. So the Deathwing image kind of represents both me and my dad and my family and anything U of A related.
Yeah, that is fantastic. There's a whole narrative and a whole human side in that single image, and so much that can be said there. And then I also want to point out the fact that you grabbed those colors and replicated it in the slide. So one other thing you mentioned that I think is really important when we talk about portfolio work is you don't always want your face visible on all your digital presences. And there's a lot of folks who are like that. And sometimes ePortfolio scholarship assumes a comfort or a desire to have our faces, our identities rendered really visible. And so you've done a really good move here where you picked something else that represents you, but doesn't necessarily force you to put something out there that you don't want to. So Cindy, we're going to take you with us everywhere. This was just a really grand example.
Sure.
Yeah. And, I want to do one more and then we'll get back to the meat of it. But you guys were really doing great. I was watching as JW was doing his. So I got to know, like, give us some rhetorical analysis here. What were your choices in terms of how you were representing yourself with design here?
Well, I suppose I asked for it. I'm actually wearing that shirt today, and it's one that, as I say, was aspirational. When I was going to go to this metal show, I figured I had to fit in. So I bought the uniform, as it were. And one of my former students was there, and he introduced me to everyone at the show as, my professor, which was hilarious. And I got a lot of, everybody was just delighted that here's this stuffy old music professor at a metal show looking like that. There's, depending on how long we have, it's aspirational in sort of breaking out of the High Point University as Disneyland mold, and going absolutely the other extreme and being as evil as I can. But I'm not actually evil at all. I recently took a survey through a psychological, I forget the group, but it was supposed to measure your dark core, and it measured you on Machiavellianism and all these, narcissism, all these different things. And I was actually so much lighter than the normal, all my bars are at the bottom. But it's something that, the Heart of Darkness was my favorite sort of fairy tale, even though, that specific telling of it is kind of on the outs these days. But that idea of descending into scary places and coming out changed on the other side is something that's, been sort of on my mind throughout my life. So anyway, that's me.
It's fantastic and it caught my eye right away. I know Shelly's going to weigh in here, but I do want to say, like, even when you had just selected this image, the stance is so evocative of the thing you are talking about, right? And I was thinking, like, this is great. Like, everything about that pose and the facial expression, you didn't even have to write the analysis. I already knew where you were going to kind of go. And so when we talk about effective curation, I think you did it, like, right off the bat. And of course you have your colors, etc. I'm going to stop Shell, let you weigh in here.
Well, no, and what I think, and this hopefully will help us transition, what's interesting about this activity here, and then thinking about it in relation to our students and portfolios and what we ask of them, is the awareness of the purpose and audience of when you do these acts. And let's be honest, this particular act, this introduction slide is actually probably one of the most common requirements on a student portfolio. Thou shalt have the About Me page, right? And in that moment, we're hopefully now everyone's at least thinking a little bit, okay, well, what are we really asking students to do with that? Who's the intended audience? Who, depending on how it's published, who is a potential or a future audience, and what are they saying about themselves? And JW's slide, I feel like JW, for this, you were in a safe space to post that, but this is probably, if your institution asked you to do an e-portfolio as a professor at the institution, my guess is this may not have been your About You page. It may have been a page about that class or about, right? But it was probably not the About You page.
Yeah, I would get a phone call about that one.
Right.
Yeah, and so Shell kind of touched on it. Our goals for this session are to generate that kind of conversation. So often when we help colleagues and in our own courses, students work with ePortfolio construction, we notice that the discussion of multimedia, how to develop it, how to effectively incorporate it, can sometimes be deprioritized. And you'll see the phrase multimodal here because, again, Shelley and I come from English studies. And when we talk about multimodality, we mean different modes of communication beyond alphabetic text. So audio, video, animation, interactivity, so forth. Those are multiple modes that are put together, and multimedia is the form in which we do that. And I'll give a quick example. I have colleagues in the sciences who swear that they don't generate any kind of media at all of student learning. And yet one department goes up to our tallest building, which happens to be the Arts and Letters building, and they drop pumpkins off of it every fall to measure velocity. And they never take pictures of students doing that, or building shacks, or helping in the community where we frequently flood and they're out there measuring. And all of that shows students practicing the discipline that they're preparing to join, right? So we wanted to pose to you all the question, and please feel free to kind of free write a response in the chat, but we're going to try to weigh in and give a few thoughts here in the rest of our slide deck. But what does engaging with multimodal ePortfolios mean for student self-representation? What does this mean for identity construction when we ask students to engage and develop multiple media artifacts? Okay, Shelley, this one's you.
As Megan said, coming from English studies, this particular quote is also from English studies, and although dated, but it's from some of the core scholars in our field about multimodal composition. And this particular quote, so I'm not going to read it. I'm one of those people who likes to leave them up there. This particular quote is really getting at the fact that, and it's over 10 years old, and I can say this statement we could probably be making for the past 20 years, is that these skills are needed. And it's interesting because a lot of times when people make the argument about why our ePortfolio is a good thing, one of the first arguments that gets made, creative and digital literacies. It's the side effect. It's the side benefit of doing ePortfolios. And that's what we at this point, I feel like we can safely say that we agree that's a side effect. We agree it's a legitimate reason for doing it. What we might not agree is, are we necessarily doing it well? And I'll use that as a transition.
And if you're at one of those institutions that really needs you to also tie this to employment beyond learning, and granted, this is likewise a little bit old, but only 3 years, there was a survey about how when employers look up job seekers on social media, what is it that they want to see? And it was interesting because it kind of flies in the face of some of the common knowledge that we hear about what it is employers want. And I think it's well worth looking at because a well-designed ePortfolio that makes effective use of multimedia can meet many of these. It can at least demonstrate to employers that students can have this thing. And so while the first one maybe isn't wildly surprising that they're looking for background information, it's the second one that really caught some of my colleagues off guard. They're looking for creativity. Well, when do we foster that in our courses? Some of us do it a lot. Many of us don't, right? It may be, as Shelley said, a side effect rather than an intentional generation of creative output. Also, the fact that they're looking for students who are well-rounded, are employees who are well-rounded and have a wide range of interests. So often, folks think about, I need to design someone who looks just like an engineer and only an engineer. And yet they want to know that there's this wide breadth of skill and interest in the human being that they're investing in. They're looking for a good feel of their personality. So, JW, you and I never met in person, but man, I'd hang out with you in a heartbeat. You had that sweet t-shirt and you're willing to kick it with your students. Fantastic. I would love to work down the hall from you. And that's what you want, right? Communication skills. The pandemic just woke a ton of people up to the fact that digital literacies have been ignored for a long time in a wide variety of disciplines. And communication no longer means just writing well. It means composing well, putting together multiple elements effectively. So many of my peers in the pandemic were like, I told them to make a video. Why can't they make a video? Did you teach them how to make a video? Did you teach them how to embed that video? Why they would embed a video? All of that is communication moving forward. And then I will end on that last one. Posted compelling video or other content, i.e. they're looking for multimedia. So it really shouldn't be an offshoot, an accidental thing that students grab because it's the only artifact they have. It should maybe be a more intentional fostering of that multimodal element of ePortfolio design.
And before Megan goes to the next slide with that last one, so pause and ask yourself, again, your instructors or administrators, are classes asking students from the beginning to be collecting artifacts that are multimedia? Because knowing at the end, they're going to need visual representations or video representations or audio representations of their work, of their learning, of their achievement. And if they're not, back to the pumpkin example, if they didn't take the pictures, it didn't happen, right? Okay, Megan, where did we land here?
I will tell you, sharing on Zoom, it does not forward motion as it would normally. And I was trying to pull up our chat and it went haywire. Okay, I'm in the chat now. All right, thank you, Shelly. So we actually have a little Jamboard. So we're going to practice with another tool. And we would like to pose to you a question. And if you are not comfortable using Jamboard, which we'll drop in the chat momentarily, you can simply put your answers in the chat. And so thank you, Shelly. We would like you to write a response and then we'll ask you to share. What aspects of a student's identity are more likely to come through in multimedia presentation, and how might that emerge? And then the last question, because I don't want us to embrace it uncritically, why might these disclosures sometimes be problematic? And so we're going to pause here and ask you to either respond in the Jamboard or respond in the chat, whatever is your comfort level.
And there's a few pages in the Jamboard in case, too many people try to overwrite one another, and we can make more if needed. I miss I'm at campus and I don't have a multi-screen set up right now, and there's too much to do. So those of you who are juggling with one monitor, thank you for trying to do this anyways. So I just want to comment on the one that was just posted about fandom, because I made a comment about how with pictures, visual identity markers become evident very quickly, right? Age, race, ability in some cases. But what I like is that once things like color choices and font choices or fandom or other less visual identity markers can be outed, right? I like that.
All right, we have a couple of responses. So would folks care to share some of the things you're posting? You're right on the money, everybody. I'm so curious about that's the Tesla comment, but we don't have to lead with that one. Who would like to start? We see comments about being careful about image selection, such as oversharing. I will tell you that the first year I ever did ePortfolio work in the Honors College, I had a student select a picture of him French kissing his girlfriend because it was the first girlfriend he'd ever had, and he was very proud of that. And that was the prompt. So we had to talk about audience and purpose. There are, as Shelly pointed out, a number of reasons that designers might be more reticent to post images. I've had a colleague who pointed out that all the data shows that as an older woman of color, were she to foreground images of herself, she might actually be negatively impacted. And so how might she combat implicit bias in her e-portfolio while her peers are kind of wildly embracing individuality and foregrounding their images? So I definitely was pulled up short, because obviously that is incredibly problematic to think about if we haven't prepared our students with alternative solutions.
Megan, our room facilitator has their hand up. I just don't know why.
Yes.
I only have it up as a participant, not as a facilitator.
Okay, I was like, uh-oh.
No, you're fine. You have 19 minutes left.
Thank you.
I just wanted to agree with that statement, because what I wrote was about how this can be an opening for discrimination as well.
Yes.
The implicit bias. We'll hear the grammar usage. Maybe this is a first generation student, dialect, where they're from, SES, technology skills, all of those things are going to come through in a multimedia presentation. And even if somebody does their best to try to be professional, there may be messages in there that somebody who shouldn't be taking them that way, is taking them that way as a negative.
Absolutely. I have a cybersecurity student. She's a graduate student. She's brilliant. Her code is fantastic, right? She does amazing hackathons, she's actually hacking systems and testing them out for companies. She tends to have a kind of baby voice. It's high and very Southern. And there was an assignment that asked her to do audio. And she said, in my field, that is a great way for people to dismiss me, because as soon as they hear, and she said, it's just her natural voice. And so we definitely try to come up with alternatives to making her foreground her voice. I always joke that I put my voice front and center in my e-portfolio because I know my voice is very sarcastic. It's genetic. I was born with this accent. But I want people to kind of know that when they encounter me, and not have it be shocking. But yes, to your point, there's all kinds of, markers of identity that can come through both in how we appear, how we present, and students will sometimes perform identity that is not, and I'm always a little bit hesitant on the word authentic, but may not be the one that they wish to truly show, right? Shelley, I know I said a lot, but I'm going to let you weigh in too.
No, I think I was going to say I was ready to kind of transition us, and I'm not quite sure what our next slide is, but I think I'm going to transition us. So the one thing so Megan, you'll pick the slide that's appropriate. The one thing that I was happy to see with these comments, and it becomes one of those things that's like, yes, we see where we're going, is one of the identity markers, or one of the things that comes through with multimodal is, again, back to this idea of creative and digital literacies, how literate they are in these ways. And on the one hand, we have, kind of these cultural expectations that doing this is so easy. All the technologies make this so easy. But once you actually try to make a video, even with one of the easier video editing applications, or try to make a fully fleshed out website, you realize there's, certain creative and digital literacies still are complex. Things like editing, I'm blanking. Sorry, you all are getting, I feel like it's still a pandemic. Call me crazy. Multi-layered editing, image editing, even cropping images, thinking about that. But then things like we got with the font and colors and contrast. I don't know about you, but I've had plenty of comments with student portfolios where I'm like, I'm having a hard time reading what you did because the color of your text in relation to the background of the page isn't contrast enough for me in my eyes, right? And so one of the things that we're kind of bringing to the forefront as part of this identity construction is making students aware that they're doing this, but then also making them aware they're starting to be judged on their creative and digital literacies. And once we acknowledge that, one, are we holding them accountable for it? So is it in our assignment prompt? Is it in our rubrics? But two, are we helping them to actually teach it to them. And so what we have for you here, kind of a next activity, and it's just taking a moment and in the chat, please share or list knowledge you associate with creative or digital literacies. And if you're kind of, so in another ways, like what do you, when someone says they're creative, they have a creative literacies, or there's creative literacies or digital literacies, what does that mean to you? And I will type in the link. If you're stuck and you're not, I don't quite know what that is, we have a list of potential ways to describe these based on AAC&U value rubric and or based on ISTE, the International Society of Teacher Technology Educators. I think that's it. So what, on the one hand, we're throwing around these terms, creative and digital literacies. What do those mean? Oh no, did I type it? Oh, I didn't, I had 2 M's instead of 3 M's. I wasn't. Thanks, Megan. So if you link out to this, what you're seeing is a matrix that another colleague and I here, Reese Davis, made that's not only thinking about what are the literacies, but then starting to think about, in this case, we were thinking about assessment. Where do you actually see these things? So what I like about this for you all, taking a moment to look at this, is one, I think it complicates what we mean by digital and creative literacies. There's a lot here, potential. Hopefully we're not trying to hold our students accountable for them all, especially in classes that this is not the content, quote unquote, content of the class. But then 2, also thinking about if you're actually trying to assess them on this, where do you see that? And similarly, part of what you start to see, student work, the actual final, final thing, the final artifact, a lot of these don't show up in the final artifact. But if, again, this is back to, if one of the things we want our students to demonstrate in these portfolios is some of these literacies, we might have to prompt them to share other things as part of their portfolio, or it's invisible. It's an invisible literacy in the final portfolio. So for example, persevere through challenges and constraints during the design or problem solving process. If we don't ask them to make that public somehow, we'll never see that.
Yeah, I think this matrix that Shelley and her colleague have put together is phenomenal, because we hear the phrase digitally literate thrown around. And a lot of times people say it, and then when I ask them to describe it, it's kind of the, oh, I know it when I see it. It's like, yeah, but it covers a wide variety of skills. And again, when do we explicitly teach students these things or scaffold this into their identity construction explicitly, right? And we're speeding up a little bit because we know we only have a little more of your time. Yes. So that's one reason. We hope you'll dig into those. And so I'd like to kind of turn back, since we problematize this idea of embracing identity. And it is important. And I wanted to show you one of ePortfolio, which is not the best portfolio in the world, but it is a good one for what we're talking about. So first, we just said, gosh, it's a real problem sometimes. We ask students to present their identity. We ask them to, what is sometimes known, engage in a pseudo transactional writing, i.e. they perform what they think we want to see. For instance, I've had LGBTQ students who are like, well, you don't want to see the real me. You want to see some version of me, right? And so in some instances they're right. An employer may want a very particular performance. And so one way that we like to come at this is to do a lot of rhetorical analysis with students, a lot of rhetorical thinking. Who is the audience, primary and secondary? What is the genre of portfolio you're looking at? A lot of times, peers might collapse ePortfolio into some sort of homogenous thing, but maybe you have an ePortfolio that's sitting out there that's kind of the quote unquote real you, and maybe there's the job market you, and maybe there's the course et cetera, thinking about purpose, delivery, and design, all the kind of rhetorical canon. And I want to show you Kevin Martinez. And so just to kind of, sorry, Zoom is not letting me move there. Oh, it's very frustrating. I know how to move slide decks, everyone. Please don't judge me this moment as we talk about multimodality. All right, I'm going to show you Kevin's. Now, I had the fortune of teaching Kevin when he was in 110, English 110, and I will give you the link to his ePortfolio. He has since graduated and landed a job 2 weeks later, and he's back doing graduate school because he realized he wanted to work for NATO. So you can scroll through Kevin's, but you will see that he's a good example of a student playing with multimedia in his world languages courses. He speaks French, German, Japanese, and Spanish, as well as English. And if you move through, you will hear him speaking it. You will see him going to France and eating food and smiling. You will see him speeding up as he learns how to speak French faster and greet people. He does a whole interview. Oh, that's the one I was looking for. Sorry. Beginning, middle, end of course. And I show you this because this is a wealth of media. It's almost too much, honestly. Like every time I show this to some peers, it overwhelms them. But that's the point, is that he knew to do it. He knew to save it. He was thinking about his representation. When he landed that job, they told him it was because of this portfolio, because they heard him speak the language. And they said, no one else, we've not heard anyone else speak the language before we interviewed them. And now he's come back and he's starting a whole new portfolio because he said, that's too much media. I now need to be more selective because I now know who I'm going to be. And I thought that's really compelling, because at least he has the skill sets to create and embed and share that media. And now he has the rhetorical knowledge to trim, to pick selectively, to be more intentional as his identity evolves. And so I will stop showing his. And before we move on to our next one really quickly, embedded throughout this slide deck, you will find links to assignments. And again, we're speeding up, so we're not going to necessarily do the next activity, but on the introduction slides, there is a link to including augmented reality within an ePortfolio for free, tying it to student images. And if you like GIFs and animation, here is a GIF activity in which I have students make selfie GIFs and think about what that image shows about themselves, the setting, et cetera, very similar to what we just did, but using animated imagery. So those are 2 takeaways in our goodie bag for you. And apologies that we overstuffed. So now I'm going to hand it off to Shell to talk about assessment.
Well, again, in your leisure, please feel free to go back to that matrix. But I think the main thing we kind of wanted to ask of you, and I'm looking at the clock, we have 6 minutes. So just to be intentional and thinking about these creative and digital literacies. So what we're getting at is a lot of the ways that the students are judged on their identity construction through multimodality comes back to their ability to do it, creative and digital literacies. And so asking you all, how are you articulating what it is you're expecting of them? Are they helping to articulate what is expected of them? Even if they go and look at other examples and ask themselves, how do they do that? But then how are you making them aware that this is, and then how are you assessing it? So for example, also, I love the example that Megan gave, is because it's a foreign language portfolio. On some level, the content lends itself to multimodality. But what's really nice is Megan's example about the sciences. A lot of the sciences content lends itself to multimodality, as long as the instructor is prompting the students from the beginning take pictures, record video, record audio. If you don't have the artifacts, you can't do it. But then here's the sad point, right? Just having the artifacts, what part of what we got at here, even with our first activity, just having the artifacts alone though isn't enough. And so really thinking about and scaffolding, what do we expect our students to do? What are we going to hold them accountable for in these portfolios? And what are they going to be judged for after the fact? And, you know, I'll just throw out this challenge that in the way that, you know, departments think about majors and designing majors and scaffolding the learning through a major, you know, questions that Megan and I now potentially ask of our colleagues doing that type of work is, well, all along from English and writing studies, we've been asking about literacy skills. Are you scaffolding in the literacy skills of what does it mean to be a scientist? What does it mean to be an architect? What does it mean to be? And now potentially we're asking the same question. Are you scaffolding in what are the multimodal, the creative and digital literacies that are associated or useful for this particular major? And in what classes? Because the one thing that matrix shows you is no one class can do all of that. If you start to hold yourself and hold your discipline and hold your major responsible for it, all of a sudden, these are serious conversations with your colleagues.
And also, just to kind of conclude, the fact that various disciplines value different forms of media and different forms of representation. You know, the English instructors can't tell the chemistry instructors how to represent that field necessarily, right? And I've seen that even down to color palettes that fields prefer. You know, having students look at modeling, but having them articulate why design is important, why media is important, which media is important for that field. Again, so often it's just kind of an afterthought, or they're like, oh gosh, that's a lot of text on a page. Let's slap something in there that's you know, stock photo of people doing science, you know, when they could be the person in the room doing the science. That's great, you know. And so we would really like to end on this, because I know throughout the conference, we've been talking about issues of diversity, inclusion, equity, et cetera. And we really think that foregrounding multimedia development and integration into ePortfolio design is one way to help prepare our students to combat implicit bias intentionally, for them to think about who might be reading them, how they might read them, and how they might make their portfolio compelling, what choices are available to them. And so that they're not just adrift in the digital sphere, but that they're really, you know, effective communicators and readers in those spaces and are advocating for themselves quite effectively. And so, you know, we thank you for your time. We know this is a mad dash through a lot of content. You're certainly welcome to revisit any of this. For the asynchronous folks, if you really want to keep engaging, we have the Jamboard, the Padlet, and of course, Shelly and I are always available via email. And we thank you all for your time, and certainly welcome any questions in our last minute or two here.